Welcome to all our viewers, and welcome to those who enjoy participating in my regular Zoom events and Facebook events. And we're delighted today to welcome Rabbi Shlomo Riskin. I'm going to say a little bit more about him in a moment, but just to say that I'd like to thank David Katz, who facilitated this webinar, who's facilitated this discussion. And David is an Ish Ne'eman, and he is the faithful helper to Rabbi Riskin for many years. I said before, he's a Kohen Gadol Me'echov. He's really a wonderful, wonderful man, and I really appreciate his participation and facilitation. Rabbi Riskin. So I have known Rabbi Riskin for many, many years, and on many occasions we've shared platforms, and we've done events together, most recently in the home of the President of Israel in September. Seems like aeons ago, but we were there to see if we could bring the Jewish people together. We think in grand ways, don't we, Rabbi Riskin? And we try to, we certainly do. My first meeting with Rabbi Riskin was more than 20 years ago, when as the rabbi of the Sachi Synagogue, I embraced him together with a very large audience when he attended a conference in London, which then subsequently, if he recalls, disinvited him for some strange reason. And as a protest to that extraordinary chutzpah, we hosted him at our shul for Shabbos, and he spoke on Motzei Shabbos. It was an absolute sellout crowd. Rabbi Riskin is not just a great leader, he's a great speaker and a great communicator, both in a spoken word and in writing. And, you know, the reason, I know it's going to be hard for you to believe, the reason why we are particularly excited to have Rabbi Riskin on one of these Zooms is because Rabbi Riskin, despite his youthful looks, is turning 80 or has turned 80. And that's an extraordinary milestone for one of the Jewish people's great Orthodox Jewish leaders. Rabbi Riskin, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so very much. It's a pleasure to be with you again.
I would like, if possible, to begin by introducing you and to tell our viewers who you are. You come from Bronx, New York, is that correct?
Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn, New York.
You know what a great poet once said about the Bronx. The Bronx, no thanks. Brooklyn,
Brooklyn,
the capital of New York.
But I remember reading that was it your grandparents who lived in the Bronx?
No, my grandmother, who was a great influence on my life, lived 2 blocks away from us, Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn.
Bedford-Stuyvesant. So you went from there and became, you went to Yeshiva University, where you drank the Torah from Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik and became close to Rabbi Belkin, who was in charge of Yeshiva University, was the president. And you graduated from there, became a rabbi, and took over a shul, Lincoln Square Synagogue. Now, you're in your autobiographical book, which is really a series of vignettes. I have it here. It's called Listening to God, Inspirational Stories for My Grandchildren. I'm showing it here to our viewers. It has a proud place on my shelf. You say that when you took over at Lincoln Square, it was rather controversial because there was no mechitza, and there was some discussion which involved Rabbi Belkin, Rav Soloveitchik, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and various others as to how an Orthodox rabbi could become involved with such a shul. Would you want to just describe to us the machinations of the sort of what was going on behind the scenes when you became the rabbi at Lincoln Square?
Behind the scenes, I felt I owed Yeshiva University a great deal. I had gone on scholarship, high school, college, and rabbinical school. And I wanted to pay them back. I was on the faculty. I was a Ram at Yeshiva University. and I was making $4,400 a year. I thought it was an amazing salary. It was the first real salary I ever made, just married. However, it was a very good place to be teaching at Yeshiva University. But I went to the community service division and I said, I feel I owe you something. And I can't give you what I think I should be giving you because of the salary I'm making. My wife had just become pregnant. I wouldn't be able to do real tzedakah. But I offered them 10 speaking engagements. At that time, the Lincoln Square West Side area was going through a whole renaissance. It used to be Hell's Kitchen, which was a horrifically horrible neighborhood. But Mayor Beam at that time very much wanted to make it gentrified and even high class, and began with an opera center and library and real culture and very expensive shopping. And into this new area, which was just beginning, there was a group that started what they called the Lincoln Square Conservative Synagogue in a hotel right near where I'm speaking about. It was just a Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur service. It didn't work so well. The rabbi there was a conservative rabbi, and he got $500 for the 3 days the first year that he was there. For the next year, he wanted to come back, but he asked them for $1,000. They didn't want to pay $1,000. And they started looking for another rabbi. One of the people they spoke to was the head of Yeshiva University Community Service. But their stipulation was that on no account would they agree to a mechitza. It had to be mixed seating. At any rate, Yeshiva University asked me if one of my speaking engagements could be to speak to them and to speak to them about Yeshiva University. I made it very clear I would definitely not go any place that was mixed seated. But I would be willing to talk for Yeshiva University, and Yeshiva would send them someone else, but it wouldn't be me. I met them. It was a Saturday night. Started at 9, finished 1:30 a.m. And they asked me all sorts of questions about Orthodoxy. They had crazy notions that Orthodox people, when they go to sleep at night, it's with special covers between themselves, the man and the woman. They can't touch each other or get close to each other ever. And I spoke about all these crazy notions that they had and what Orthodoxy really was, modern Orthodoxy. At the end of the time, they said, good, we want you. I said, I'm sorry, I think Yeshiva explained to you. I won't go to a mixed-seated service. Anyway, the more I said no, they said yes. I asked Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik initially said to me, what do you need it for? People don't usually change the synagogue. They get changed. It's not good for you to go. I was thrilled. I didn't want to go. Dr. Belkin called me in, and Dr. Belkin had accepted me on scholarship when I first came to YU after high school. And he was very good to me. And he said, I know the neighborhood. I want you to go. You'll make the change. I said, I can't go. Rabbi Soloveitchik told me not to go. The next day, Rabbi Soloveitchik called me in, and he said to me, look, I spoke to Dr. Belkin. He thinks you should go. I withdraw what I said before. You can go. but not daven with them. And you have to daven by yourself, and not to take any salary. I was still not certain, not very happy. And for the first time in my life, I called the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a cold call. He saw me that night at 3 o'clock a.m. It was a very brief meeting, but what he said to me was, you have a wonderful Rebbe. They're very good friends. They were very good friends, by the way. They studied together in the University of Berlin. You have a very good Rebbe. Don't second guess him. As long as you don't accept a salary and it's clear that you won't be the official rabbi of a synagogue that's mixed-seated, you have to understand that in every battle, there are people who dress like the enemy, go into the enemy territory. Their own compatriots thinks they're turncoats, but without those people, you can't win the battle. And he looked at me in a very empowering way. And I understood the greatness of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, because what he did was really empowered his people. And he took my hand and he said, you will win the war. I left and felt that I should go, and I would go, and I would try it. Rabbi Soloveitchik gave me his clear blessings, and I went. And Rabbi Soloveitchik made it clear that I should try to start a Shabbos shul. And the 3 days went very, very well. And I did try to start a Shabbat shul. I found an apartment in one of the new luxury Lincoln Tower buildings in the area. We had made $5,000 at an appeal on Yom Kippur, and the $5,000 went for that apartment. And I stayed at a hotel, and I didn't accept a salary. By the Friday before Sukkot, Yom Tov Sukkot, we had the other apartment to begin another shul. There were 18 people who came to that first Friday night service. Not one of them could read Hebrew. It was clearly outreach. And Baruch Hashem, by the next Purim, that Purim of that year, we had a mechitza in the shul. I had a salary. I hired a chazan Gaffin. ASO, rest in peace. Also, we were like brothers and worked along with me tremendously well. And the synagogue became one of the most important synagogues in New York, Orthodox synagogues, thank God.
An incredible testament to Shlach Lachmecha al Pnei Hamayim. And of course, I have to mention that many decades later, it's one of your Talmidim, my good friend Rabbi Shlomo Riskin, who's the rabbi of Lincoln Square Synagogue, and who's doing incredible work.
Great. And I'm very proud. He's a musmach of mine. He has smicha from us. He learned in our yeshiva in Efrat for 7 years. Originally from Scotland, as you know.
Yes.
And then England. And I'm very, very proud of him. And he's doing magnificent work.
We're going to come back. I just want to remind you of a story you once told me many, many years ago, of a conversation you had with Rav Soloveitchik, because you used to go and ask him Shilas. And he said, if I remember correctly, he said it to you in Yiddish, the Welt macht das Tos. Sie meinen, als ich bin der Rov, und als Moshe Feinstein ist Rosh Hashiva. Aber es ist punktverkehrt. What was your relationship like with Rav Moshe Feinstein, and what was the relationship like between Rav Soloveitchik and his relative, Rav Moshe Feinstein?
Right, Rav Moshe Feinstein was his cousin.
Yes.
And they were very close. They had a wonderfully close relationship. Very interesting one. And I went every Thursday I was teaching at Yeshiva University. Every Thursday I went to Rabbi Soloveitchik with questions. And there were many questions about Shuvi synagogue with people with no background, questions of mamzerut, difficult halachic questions. Rabbi Soloveitchik did not like psak. He liked theoretical halacha. And therefore, he looked at me after a while and he said to me, look, I don't like psak, and I'm not good at it. But as you put it very well, my first cousin, who is really the Rav because he was a Shtat Rav in Europe, and only a synagogue rabbi should be paskening. He felt that way very much because only a rabbi of a synagogue knows the problem of the people and where the people are. And you can't answer a question, a halachic question, in a vacuum. You have to answer it to an individual with an individual question and what goes into that question. So he sent me to Rav Moshe Feinstein, and every Friday from 9 to 12 for a full year, I had the privilege of sitting with Rav Moshe Feinstein, who was a giant as well as Rav Soloveitchik, and asked him all of my questions from that week. He shared with me the questions he had gotten that week, and it was just amazing. An amazing, amazing experience.
It was an extraordinary time. So many European Gedolim were in New York. You were very lucky to have had access to them.
Absolutely. But I'll give you one example which colored my entire halachic career. On one Thursday when I was speaking to Rabbi Soloveitchik, he got a call from Rebbetzin Feinstein. Rav Moshe Feinstein gave a tshuva, a responsa, to the question of artificial insemination. Could a married woman whose husband was not able to impregnate her be artificially inseminated by someone else's sperm? Rav Moshe Feinstein answered to the affirmative. She can. This caused an entire uproar in certainly the ultra-Orthodox world.
I've actually given a very extensive lecture on this topic, which perhaps we'll put the link on the YouTube. We'll have the link to this lecture so that people can find out much more about it. It became a cause célèbre in New York.
A cause célèbre is an understatement. To burn Rav Moshe Feinstein's books, and he was a Talmid Chacham, a Gadol b'Yisrael, who had no peer. At any rate, that was the situation. And Rebbetzin Feinstein was speaking to Rav Soloveitchik. I was in the room asking him questions. So of course I could hear her in the phone, from the telephone, as if she were right next to me. And she begged Rav Soloveitchik, you must tell my husband that he has to withdraw his decision. They call us up in the middle of the night. They tell me my husband was killed. In addition to burning the books, they're destroying my heart. You must tell him to withdraw his decision. Rav Soloveitchik promised that he would speak to Rav Moshe. Afterwards, he said to me, Rav Moshe will not change his mind. Rav Moshe is as strong as a lion. If he feels he's correct halachically, he will not change his mind. On Fridays, I used to go to Rav Moshe, FDR Drive in Manhattan. I went to Rav Moshe, my usual trip. And with my Rabbeim, I had what I consider the greatest Rabbeim imaginable. Rav Moshe and Rav Soloveitchik and the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I asked questions sometimes with arrogance, with chutzpah, that maybe it wasn't so proper to ask those questions. but I felt this is my opportunity to learn. And these are great men. So I began on that Friday morning. I said to Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Moshe, yesterday I was with Rav Soloveitchik, and your Rebbitzin called, and she was extremely upset. Rebbe, why don't you withdraw your psak? It's destroying your wife. And he looked at me hard, and he said to me, do you know how many women who weren't able to conceive, I enabled them to conceive and to have children? Don't you understand that for a woman, barrenness sometimes is akin to taking away her life? And giving her the opportunity to conceive is restoring to her life. Remember what Rachel Imenu said to Yaakov, Havali banim ometa anochi. Give me children or I will die. He said, I will never take back my heter, my permissibility. It's correct halachically. It is not a sexual act. I would never take away my permission, even if they burnt me. That's a Gadol B'Torah, and a courageous Gadol B'Torah.
An extraordinary man. During the course of your rabbinate, and it's important, I think, for some of the rabbis who are watching to know that one comes across all kinds of curious characters and challenges in the course of a rabbinate. I remember you've told me the story of Sanford Bernstein, who you were very close to, Sanford Bernstein, whose money now funds the great Avichai Foundation, but who was not so well known and who you became very close to in New York. Perhaps tell us a little bit about Sanford, but also about some of the other challenges you came across as a rabbi, how one has to deal with them, these challenges in a sort of broader way. You're not in the Koisle Yeshiva. You're not sitting in a Beis Medrash when you're dealing with real people. And as one sees in the Gemara, when you deal with real people, you have to deal in real situations. It's not quite the same way as when you're in the bubble of your Orthodox Jewish life.
We were still in the apartment in New York. And on Wednesday evenings, I would first give a Chumash class, and then philosophy, something that was more general class that attracted a very large audience, 300, 400, sometimes 500 people. And then we would daven Ma'ariv. To this second philosophy class, there was someone who came, who sat right up front. I didn't know him. He hadn't come before. He was without a tie. He was wearing a turtleneck sweater. So I thought, I must admit, that he was a bit of a schlepper, because everybody else came with a suit and a tie. He seemed to be listening very, very intently. And at the end of the lecture, he jumped up and he said, "Hey, Rabbi, I like your style. I have to say Kaddish now." So I said to him, "What is your name?" He says, "Sanford Bernstein." I said, "Mr. Bernstein, now everybody is leaving and it's pretty noisy. And we'll go upstairs. We have an evening service and we'll say Kaddish right after the evening service." "Okay," he says, goes upstairs. He didn't know how to hold a sitter. I tried to help him as best as I could, but he said Kaddish like water. And after he said Kaddish, he said, "Hey, Rabbi, I told you I like your style. Too bad you won't take me as a member of your synagogue." I looked at him and I said, we take a lot of different people. We'll take you too. He said, no, you won't. I've been married to a Gentile woman for the last 30 years. I said to him, let's go into my office and discuss it. Because in the Constitution that I wrote for the new Lincoln Square Synagogue, we said that we wouldn't accept intermarried couples. So I said, let's go into my office and let's talk about it. No, Rabbi, I'll talk about it right here. There were about 80 people. Everybody is there. Everybody is listening. He said, will you take me or won't you take me as a member of your synagogue? I took a deep breath. And I said, why would someone who is married to a Gentile woman for 30 years want to become a member of an Orthodox synagogue? He lifted up his turtleneck sweater, which my wife later explained to me is very special and is more chic than a button-down shirt with a tie. And he shows me under the turtleneck sweater, tzitzit, the ritual fringes. And he said they found these ritual fringes on my father's body when he died a few months ago of a heart attack, very suddenly. I'm wearing them now. I thought to myself, here's somebody who is truly trying to return to Judaism. And I said to him, it'll be a pleasure to take you as a member of Lincoln Square Synagogue. He looked at me again, and he took out of his pocket a checkbook. How much is it? I really had no idea how much membership was. I said $75. I said $75, but you have to learn with me for an hour a week, every week. He said, great. Immediately gave me the check. There were tears in his eyes. Let's learn tomorrow. We made a date and learned the next day. The story goes on, and I mean, I could go on for a very, very long time. I'll just give you a quick next step. I met him. I came late. I don't drive. I have a terrible sense of direction. I came by bicycle to his very fancy office on the 22nd floor. Everything is green, the color of dollar bills, obviously. I get to his office, and his secretary says, you're the rabbi? I said, yes. You're 20 minutes late. I said, that's right, I came by bicycle. I'm sorry, I was in traffic. Mr. Bernstein will speak to you on the telephone. I said, but we have an appointment. You are 20 minutes late. Rabbi, Mr. Bernstein will speak to you on the telephone. And she hands me a green telephone. Hey, Rabbi, I do like your style, but I don't like you coming late. You keep me waiting 20 minutes, I keep you waiting 20 minutes. Time is money. I said, no, Mr. Bernstein. Time is life, much more precious than money. Because I came late, you're doing something else, I'll wait for you for 4 or 5 hours if I have to until you're ready for me. I'm really apologizing to you. However, if you're punishing me, I really don't have time to be punished. The door opens up maybe 12 inches from where I was sitting outside. He was right there. There was another door. Takes me in, sits me down, and says, I still like your style. He, at the same time, prepared lunch for us. So he's eating a cheeseburger. For the first time in my life, I was so close to a cheeseburger. He's eating a cheeseburger. The sign on top says, large green letters, no smoking. And he's smoking the largest, thick cigars, smelly cigars I ever smelled in my life. I look at him and I say, look at your sign and what's with your cigar? He says to me, hey, Rabbi, I make the rules in my synagogue, in my office. You may make the rules in your synagogue, but I'm here the boss. No smoking, cigarettes. Cigars are fine. And he puffs right in my face. I'm sitting with him and we start learning. And I had a Bible for me and a Bible for him. And I had a whole way of teaching beginners from Bereshit Bara Elokim, from the beginning of the Bible. And we're studying, and he's listening very well, and he's asking very good questions. And then after a while, he looks at me and he says, Rabbi, you're as green as our walls. What's the matter? And I really didn't feel well. And I said to him, I'll tell you the truth. The cigar smoke and the cheeseburger, and whenever he liked especially something I said, he would jump up and curse like a drunken sailor. And your vocabulary, it just doesn't go together with my Bible study. It's very hard for me. So he took the cigar and he threw it in the garbage can. He also took the unopened, unfinished cheeseburger and threw it in the garbage can. And then he said, for every bad word I say, I will give $180 to tzedakah, but not to any of your shuls or schools. Pick something else. And I said, you can give it to Chabad. And I called up a rabbi from Chabad that I knew very well. At the end of that session, he got $1,800. He told me to study with Mr. Bernstein 3 times a day, and he could retire. And we became very close, Bernstein and I, and he became a complete shomer Torah mitzvot, and a great, great giver to tzedakah.
It's a remarkable story about to have the prescience in a moment when you're challenged, how to deal with a situation like that as a rabbi. Now, I have another book of yours here. I know that we're going to talk about Judaism, a love story, in a moment, but this is a beautiful book. By the way, we share publishers, Maggid, Matthew Miller, but this book is The Living Tree, Studies in Modern Orthodoxy. And you mentioned modern Orthodox a bit earlier on. I want to understand from you, as one of, I would say, the senior Orthodox rabbis in the world today, certainly one of the best known, what's the difference between modern Orthodoxy and Orthodoxy? I sometimes find that difficult to explain to people. And is it important to add the adjective modern to Orthodox to identify oneself in a particular way? Surely Orthodoxy is Orthodoxy, whether it's modern or whatever the other kind is. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
You know, it's not so that Orthodoxy is Orthodoxy. There is also ultra-Orthodoxy. Ultra-Orthodoxy that never truly recognized the state of Israel and the importance of Israel. And they're also Orthodox. Modern Orthodoxy simply means taking into account the changes in history, the changes in society, taking into account the new world that we're living in just about every generation. Halacha really means progression. And halacha for the last 4,000 years has taken into account all the changes under the rubric of Jewish law. Because the philosophy of Jewish law, the theology of Jewish law, is open enough and broad enough to accept every area, like the artificial insemination question that had its precedence in fundamental principles of Jewish law. Now, Orthodoxy alone can very often only deal with the law. And if anything is new, and new things arise, and new problems arise, they turn their backs on them. Modern Orthodoxy means that we have to be alive to the modern changes, and either they can fit within halacha or they cannot. But we have to, as certain as possible, we have to try to make halacha speak to them as well. Now, for example, the mechitza and separate seating, I did not believe that according to Jewish law, as it developed through the ages, that there was room for mixed-seated prayer services. That was what I thought in the beginning of my rabbinate in New York. Mechitza after mechitza was put down, taken out, and Orthodox synagogues were completely passé when I first took my shul in 1964. But I felt very strongly separate seating is important, but it's important to make separate seating fit into recognizing women as important members of the synagogue and the Jewish community. So that the synagogue that we built, the Orthodox synagogue that we built in Lincoln Square, was novel in the sense that it was a synagogue in the round. The men and the women, to a great extent, faced each other, and there was equal seating on every side for men and for women. The mechitza in front of the women enabled them to see completely at the same time that there was separate seating. But the halacha remains separate seating, but in a way that still shows respect for women. So this was very important. And this is what modern Orthodoxy means.
At some point in the 1980s, or perhaps earlier, you began to think about moving to Eretz Israel. And I want to get back to that in a minute, but I do want to understand your take on leadership in Chutz La'aretz, because I know you've worked so hard since that time to ensure that your Talmidim and your Musmachim are rabbis not just in communities in Israel, but across the Jewish world. Didn't you feel that your own leadership skills and your own influence in New York was more important than living in Eretz Yisrael? Or put it another way, why did you feel that you could in some way abandon that project because of your incredible Zionism and belief in a Jewish state?
First of all, I stayed in the synagogue until I felt that it was secure as a modern Orthodox synagogue. And that was very important. I wouldn't leave them in the middle. I wouldn't have thought that was fair. At the same time, however, I try to be a religious Jew. And I believe that there is a mitzvah V'horashtem et haaretz v'yashavtem ba. We shall inherit the land and dwell in it. That now, after 2,000 years, we have the ability to live in Israel. I couldn't imagine not fulfilling that great mitzvah, which was such an amazing mitzvah in our generation, after Jews crying and getting up in the middle of the night and praying to God for a return to Israel. I couldn't imagine not living in Israel. And
My son,
for me, that became very
son
important.
Mayor, who's just graduating EULA here in Los Angeles, is imminently going to Israel to become a lone soldier and is joining Tzahal. And it's a struggle for those of us who live in the United States, particularly at this moment, to understand the tension between living in the diaspora and living in Eretz Yisrael. And one has to struggle with one's identity, as you put it, as a Jew, in the face of the fact that we are able to live in Eretz Yisrael and to protect our country and to fight battles which are relevant to the Jewish nation, as opposed to fighting the battles of a foreign country in a foreign country. Which brings me to my next subject before we come back to Eretz Yisrael, because I think that's an extremely important topic, which is the riots which are currently, or protests which turn into riots and looting currently raging across the United States in the wake of the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis by a policeman, Derek Chauvin. And I know that you recall vividly the riots of 1968 following the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I just want to understand from you, the broad perspective of history is something that many of us don't have. And the one advantage is that's really the main advantage of age, and you're reaching this incredible milestone, is having that perspective. How would you characterize the development of justice and equality in the United States, and perhaps not the development, so that it has resulted in what is ultimately exactly the same kind of civil unrest that was experienced more than 50 years ago? And what advice would you give to Jews who live in the diaspora with regard to their attitude to what's going on at the moment?
I marched with Martin Luther King. I can't tell you I knew him. He didn't know me. I didn't know him. I was a youngster. But I revered him. I followed his speeches. I came from Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn. We were the only Caucasians on our block. My friends were the African Americans. And one of the things that I learned very strongly is to just be friendly with them. Friendship, human care, and love overcomes all barriers, especially racial barriers. Now, I'm very concerned about what's happening now in America and the looting that's going on. Very much concerned. I think President Trump made an excellent speech, and his going to St. John's Church, I thought, was a very wonderful move. And I think what he was saying was very important. First, he said clearly and unequivocally that no policeman has the right to treat a black any differently than he treats a white. And that those people who were there when the murder takes place, and it was a murder. I don't think it was a third-degree murder. I think it was a first-degree murder. We'll see what will happen now in the trial that will take place quite soon. I think that the 2 or 3 policemen who stood by and didn't do anything to stop the policeman who's whose heels were on the chest of the man who was killed. I think that they certainly should likewise be charged with aiding and abetting the crime. In fact, I think they have been. And there must be a strong, strong drive to make certain that the police departments in each place are colorblind in terms of their relationship towards the blacks. At the same time, however, this dare not be used as an excuse for looting. And the most important thing is law and order in any society. If there's no justice, there can be no safety. That's what the president said, and he was absolutely correct. So that first and foremost, there dare not be looting. There's never an excuse for it. And about this, if the National Guard has to be brought out, the National Guard has to be brought out. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I think to a certain extent, it's taken America a very long time to get out of the Civil War. They're still not completely out of it. And that has to take place now also, as quickly as possible, but not at the expense of law and order. There must be justice and there must be safety. Without safety, there will be no justice. Without justice, there will be no safety.
I want to turn now to Eretz Israel, to Medinat Yisrael, the love of your life. You have been the chief rabbi of Efrat for many, many years. You've built up Torah institutions for boys, for girls, training rabbis. You've done incredible work, both as a rabbi and as an educator. You began in New York, of course, but you focused your life's effort really in Eretz Israel. But Eretz Israel is also not a perfect country, and there's a lot of friction and tension and difficulties with the different segments and sections of society. You know, again, with the perspective of history, how do you see things going forward? How do you predict, without being a novi, but being a royas hanoilod, how do you predict things unfolding going forward with regard to unity for the Jewish people, which of course was the project that we were promoting when we last met at President Rivlin's house?
It's a very interesting question. First of all, Israel is a miracle country. I see it every day, and I cannot tell you how correct I think I was in moving to Israel. I've had the opportunity to be involved in the creation of a city. This could never have happened outside of Israel. I bring with me a certain background, and therefore we have excellent relations with the Arab peoples and the Arab communities, the Palestinian communities near Efrat. Wonderful relations. Their leadership is a terrible leadership, but the Palestinian people are a very good people with a strong work ethic, and I think they would work with us if only their leadership would allow them to. As far as the Jewish situation, one of my very important, I would say almost the crusades, has been for women's rights in halacha. First and foremost, women studying Gemara, Torah Sheba'al Peh, on the highest of levels, even getting ultimately Murat Torah, which allows them to paskin shaylas, to decide halachic questions. Now it's interesting that we've succeeded magnificently. Our schools have succeeded magnificently. And I get absolutely no pushback in Israel from the establishment Orthodox world that was there before I came. And it's been very much accepted. There are many great Rosh Yeshiva in Israel, to the right of me, who have come to celebrate their granddaughters having become Morot Torah, people who can decide halachic issues. Our schools are doing very well, very much accepted. I preach, as you know very well. I think that's your preachment as well. We're proud Orthodox rabbis. However, we must show respect to conservative and reform. That does not mean that reform, conservative, their view of halacha should be accepted in Israel. It does, however, mean that they have to have a place to pray in the kotel. The kotel dare not be only a shrine for the Orthodox. It should be a shrine for Klal Yisrael, just as Israel has to be a place for Klal Yisrael. And therefore, non-Orthodox rabbis should be respected. They can't expect to become the law of Israel, because I think even the non-observant Jews in Israel, the synagogue they don't go to is an Orthodox synagogue. And when they have to bar mitzvah a child or bring a daughter to the chuppah in a shul, they'll pick an Orthodox shul. But it does mean that we have to have respect. And we have to try to bring all Jews closely together in every sense of the term.
Which brings me to my final point of the beautiful title of your new book. I'm not sure if it's out yet. I know that publication was imminent. Judaism, a love story, a theological, Zionistic, and humanistic study. Why be Jewish? That's this sort of subtitle. I'm not going to ask you to summarize the entire book, but what motivated you to write this book? You've written many others. What motivated you now, at the age of 80, to come out with this particular tract? And what is it that you hope it will achieve for those who read it?
I believe that in the main, the explanations of Orthodox Judaism, halachic Judaism, has been very heavy on minutia of halacha and very light on the love of halacha. And the loving God, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, of the Jewish people and the humanity of the world. I really believe that the essence of Judaism is this love. God's love for the world, for humanity, and God's chosenness of the Jewish people as his messengers to teach the world at least the ethical teachings of the Torah, and perhaps even the entire Torah itself. But love is the most important thing for everyone. Rabbi Akiva said it very well. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Love your friend like yourself. Zeh klal gadol b'Torah. The largest law of the Torah. And who is reacha? You must love your friend like you love yourself. Now, there are some rabbis who say your fellow Orthodox Jews. I don't think that's the interpretation. There are others who say every Jew. I don't believe that's it either. The Ibn Ezra says very clearly every human being. Every human being who is created by God in his image. And I want to just cite one very important verse, which I believe is the most important verse in the Bible. When the Bible describes God's creation of the first human being, Vayitzer Hashem Elokim et Adam, and God formed the human being, Afar min ha'adama, a clay vessel from earth. In other words, the physical, animalistic aspect of the human being. Vayipach ba'apav nishmat chayim, and God breathed into the nostrils of this kind of clay vessel. Vayihi ha'adam ruach nefesh chaya, and the individual became a living being. Targum Onkelos, which is the only interpretation of the Bible accepted by Chazal officially, by our sages officially. For Ruach Chaya, our rabbis tell us it means Ruach Mamalala, a communicating spirit. The human being was created from the breath soul of God. Vayipach nishmato. God exhaled. You know, it's interesting. Michelangelo, in the Capella di Sistina, in the Sistine Chapel, has pictures, magnificent masterpieces based upon the Bible. And he has a magnificent piece, God creating the human being. This is the only piece, I think, that has nothing to do with the biblical verse. He has a finger of God touching the finger of the first human being, and it was created by the finger. Now, the Bible doesn't say that. The Bible says, Vayipach ba'apav nishmat chayim, that God exhaled into the clay dummy the breath soul, nishmat chayim, the breath soul of life. Now, our mystical sources, the Zohar HaKadosh, the Holy Zohar, says, Kol man denafach, whoever exhales, exhales from within himself. What the Torah is telling me in very clear terms is that the God of love, and that's what Yud Hey Vav Hey, Jehovah, actually means, the God of love. Vav and Vet interchange, Ta'ava, Te'ivon, they interchange. Hey Vav Hey is like Hey Vet Hey, is Ahava, is love. The God of love exhaled into the clay dummy representing the animalistic part of the human being and created the human being. This is an amazing, amazing point, because I understand Michelangelo. How can you possibly put on canvas and exhale? But the Zohar HaKadosh says, whoever exhales, exhales from within atzmiuto v'tochiuto, his existential being, his innermost being. He lets out his innermost being. God took from whatever his innermost being is and gave of that innermost being to the first human being and to every human being, so that we have some of God within each of us. And God created us by giving to us. And God's name is love. And love means to give. Ahava, have, give. So every human being has a part of God within him. And this is the most important aspect of Judaism. That there's a part of God, there's certainly a God without that one sees within the magnificent universe. And as someone said very recently, a space traveler, they used to say, there's no atheist in a foxhole. He said, there's no atheist who travels in space. God is certainly above us without, but God is especially within us. And God gave to us and thereby created us. And we must give to others and help recreate others. And we must give to world and help recreate a more perfect world. Because the Torah says God's world is important and human beings have to perfect it. It's imperfect and we have to perfect it. So this is love. Love means to give of oneself in order to help other, in order to perfect the world. And that's what I think the Jewish message in all of its glory is. And that's what I tried to show from the creation of the world through all of our festivals, feast days, fast days, important days. That's the message. Love can transform every individual and transform the world. And when you love, you're expressing what God put into you and hopefully wants to put into the entire world.
Beautiful words. Before we say goodbye, Rabbi Riskin, and I'm sorry that we have to, I could go on for ages. You know that you have many friends, many devoted fans here in Beverly Hills, Los Angeles.
Thank you very much.
And you've been here a few times since I've been the rabbi, but even before I became the rabbi of the shul, you visited regularly. We haven't seen you for some time. Please share a few words of greeting to all your dear friends here in Beverly Hills and all those who are viewing this particular discussion, and hopefully will be watching it on YouTube as well. Share some personal thoughts for us.
Thank God we do have wonderful friends, beloved friends in Los Angeles. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we really hope to be back soon. It was that virus that made it impossible to travel, but I hope that will soon be lifted. And I look forward to coming back, really. And you know, one of my homes away from home has been your synagogue, and I would hope to visit as well. The most important thing I can say is there were Jews not only in Israel, but throughout the world since the Second Commonwealth. And the diaspora Jews made a tremendous contribution to Jewish life. And therefore, although I felt that I wanted to do the mitzvah of keeping Israel because this was the great miracle of our generation, I wanted to be part of that miracle. At the same time, we are all one united community, I would hope. The Jews in Israel and the Jews out of Israel. And that it's very important that we respect each other, that we work together, and that we really try very hard to make us one. And our message of God's love, our message of the unity of all of humankind. After all, it's our Bible. The fact that we were all created in God's image, that's what makes all human beings equal. That's also the message that gave birth to America, hopefully. The importance of the pursuit of life, liberty, life, liberty, and
the pursuit of happiness.
happiness. That's right. That's basic, very, very basic to what America stands for and what Judaism stands for. So Be'ezrat Hashem, it's important for our communities to be one. Babylonian Jewry contributed a great deal during the Second Commonwealth, while there was a very living and vibrant community in Israel. And I would hope that in this generation, we will see that as well. We will be able to see in this generation great things coming from Israel, great things coming from the diaspora with mutual respect and love.
Rabbi Riskin, it's been a great pleasure speaking to you, and I appreciate very much that you've given us so much of your time. And I look forward to seeing you very soon in good health here in Los Angeles, or alternatively on a visit to Eretz Israel. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You, God bless. All the best.
All the best to you. Thank you.